Captain Heinrich Weber had spent 31 years flying for Lufthansa, over 20,000 flight hours, every major aircraft type, training captain on wide-body international routes. When Lufthansa partnered with Philippine Airlines, Weber was assigned to evaluate their operations. He met Captain Miguel Santos in the Manila briefing room. Miguel extended his hand. "Captain Weber, I'm your first officer on today's Manila-Frankfurt flight. Welcome to Philippine Airlines." Weber shook hands politely but sighed inwardly. He'd reviewed Miguel's file at 1,000 hours, mostly regional Asian routes. Competent for domestic flying, he supposed, but this was long-haul international. During pre-flight briefing, Miguel reviewed the flight plan thoroughly: weather systems, fuel calculations, alternates, emergency procedures. When Miguel mentioned he'd flown this route dozens of times, Weber responded condescendingly. "That's good, Miguel. I've flown across Asia for 20 years on much larger aircraft. The A350 handles differently than the regional jets you have most hours on. Just follow my lead." Miguel smiled politely, accustomed to this attitude from European captains. What Weber didn't know was that Miguel had trained rigorously in the Philippines, accumulated hours flying in Southeast Asia's most challenging conditions, island approaches in tropical weather, mountainous terrain, typhoon operations, then spent 5 years flying cargo into remote Pacific airstrips with minimal ground support. The Manila-Frankfurt flight departed normally. Weber flew the departure with textbook precision. Miguel handled communications and monitored systems. 6 hours into the 11-hour flight, cruising at 41,000 feet over the Arabian Peninsula, the master warning alarm activated. Engine fire, number 2. Weber's training took over. He shut down fuel flow, activated fire suppression. The fire extinguished, but now they were flying across the Middle East at night with one engine shut down. "We need to divert," Weber said tensely. "Miguel, nearest suitable airport." Miguel was already checking. "Sir, 3 options. Muscat, 280 miles east. Doha, 320 northwest. Dubai, 290 north-northeast. Current winds favor Doha. Excellent emergency facilities. Doha, declare emergency. Start descent." Miguel contacted ATC, received priority clearance. They had 298 passengers aboard. Single-engine operations were challenging but manageable, exactly what they'd trained for. Then everything deteriorated. Descending through 35,000 feet, another warning. Hydraulic system, a pressure dropping rapidly. "Sir, we're losing hydraulic pressure down to 1,800 psi and falling." The A350 had 3 hydraulic systems, but losing one reduced control authority significantly. Before they could process that, a 3rd warning: electrical system fault. "Captain, generator 1 is unstable. Load shedding activated. We're on generator 3 and batteries." Weber felt real fear. Failed engine, degraded hydraulics, compromised electrical compound failures that shouldn't happen together. The aircraft became increasingly difficult to control. They were 220 miles from Doha, descending through 28,000 feet over dark desert. Weber had trained extensively for individual emergencies, but this combination overwhelmed his decision-making. He'd always flown with comprehensive ground support and multiple backups. Now systems were failing in cascade, and he struggled to prioritize while maintaining control. Miguel saw the stress in Weber's face. "Captain, I recommend we stabilize before continuing descent. Let me run compound emergency checklist while you fly. I'll manage systems and communications." Weber nodded, grateful. "Agreed. You have systems and radios. I'll maintain control." Miguel worked methodically. First priority, electrical power for flight controls. He reconfigured to prioritize the remaining generator and batteries to essential systems. Second, hydraulic assessment. System A lost, but B and C still functioning, reduced but adequate control if they flew carefully. Third, verify divert options given degraded systems. Doha was still 200 miles away. He wasn't certain they could maintain controlled flight 30 more minutes with continuing degradation. He scanned for alternatives: military airfield 90 miles ahead, shorter runway but much closer. Captain, Al Ain, military field 90 miles ahead, runway 8,900 feet, shorter than ideal but much closer. Given our system's degradation, I recommend it as primary divert instead of continuing to Doha. Weber wrestled with sluggish controls. He'd never landed at a military field, never operated without full airline infrastructure. "Miguel, I need a full facility airport, emergency equipment, maintenance support, passenger handling." We continue to Doha. Miguel kept his voice calm but firm. Sir, I understand, but we're losing systems. If we lose another hydraulic system or the remaining generator, we may not have controllability for 30 more minutes. Al Ain has emergency response. Getting on the ground safely is priority 1. Support services are secondary. Weber hesitated. His training said go to the major airport, but Miguel's assessment was correct. Getting this crippled aircraft down quickly mattered more than optimal facilities. You've flown into military fields before? Yes, sir. Several times during cargo flying. Shorter runways, basic facilities, but adequate for emergency landing. I can talk us through the approach. That admission the Filipino first officer had experienced the senior European captain lacked was humbling, but Weber was professional enough to recognize relevant expertise. All right, Al Ain, primary. You set it up. Miguel coordinated with ATC, declared increasing emergency severity, requested vectors to Al Ain. He briefed Weber on the approach, carefully managed descent. Early configuration because degraded hydraulics made changes slower. Firm landing planned since reduced hydraulic pressure meant less effective initial braking. Descending toward Al Ain. The fourth failure occurred. Flight control computers downgraded to alternate law, reducing automatic protections and requiring more precise manual flying. Weber felt the aircraft become even harder to control. His focus was entirely on maintaining stable flight. Miguel managed everything else: radios, checklists, system reconfigurations, approach planning. He briefed cabin crew, ensured passengers were prepared, coordinated with Al Ain Tower for emergency equipment. 12 miles from runway, Miguel called for landing configuration. Flaps extended slowly. Landing gear came down and locked, but extension took longer than normal. Weber hand flew the approach with intense concentration, fighting asymmetric thrust and reduced hydraulic authority. Miguel provided continuous support. 5 miles, on glide path, speed 160 knots, sink rate 700 feet per minute, looking good. Captain. 4 miles, slightly left of centerline, suggest 5 degrees right. At 2 miles, Miguel made a critical call. Captain, we're slightly high and our sink rate is lower than optimal given degraded braking. I recommend accepting being slightly high rather than increasing sink rate, and plan for longer rollout. Runway is long enough if we touch down in the first third. Weber trusted Miguel's judgment. Agreed, maintaining current profile. They crossed the threshold at exactly right speed and height. Weber flared carefully, fighting reduced hydraulic response. The A350 touched down firmly about 1,500 feet down the runway. Miguel deployed speed brakes manually. Reverse thrust. Weber activated reverse on the single engine while Miguel monitored asymmetric forces. The aircraft decelerated, tracking slightly right, but Weber corrected smoothly. They slowed through 80 knots, 60, 40, and rolled to complete stop 7,200 feet down the runway, with 1,700 feet remaining. The cabin erupted in applause. Emergency vehicles approached. Weber sat for a moment, hands on controls, breathing heavily. He'd just landed a crippled wide body with compound failures at a military field at night, something he'd never trained for. And he'd done it successfully because his Filipino first officer had managed the emergency with expertise. Weber didn't possess. After passengers evacuated safely, Weber and Miguel sat in the quiet cockpit. Weber looked at his first officer. Miguel, when we started this flight, I thought I was flying with a regional pilot with less experience. I was wrong. You just managed a compound emergency I wouldn't have handled successfully without you. When systems started failing, I was becoming overwhelmed. You stayed calm, prioritized correctly, made the call to divert to Al Ain when I wanted to continue to Doha. That decision probably saved this aircraft. He continued. Those regional hours I dismissed included flying into challenging airports without the support I've always relied on. When we had compound failures over the desert, you knew how to manage them because you've operated where you couldn't depend on perfect systems. I've flown sophisticated aircraft into major European airports with every backup. You've flown where you had to be more resourceful. Tonight, that experience saved 298 lives. Miguel appreciated the acknowledgement. Captain Weber, you flew that approach beautifully under extremely difficult conditions. We worked well as a crew. Weber shook his head. It's more than that. I almost killed us by insisting we continue to Doha. When you correctly assessed we needed to get down sooner, I was thinking about facilities instead of safety. You made the right call, and you had to convince me even though I'm the captain. That took courage, and you were right. The investigation revealed catastrophic engine failure had triggered cascading secondary failures, debris, severed hydraulic lines, and damaged electrical systems. Investigators praised the crew's handling, specifically noting the decision to divert to nearest suitable airport rather than continuing to planned divert had been critical to success. Weber requested Miguel be formally recognized. In his report, Weber wrote, "First Officer Santos demonstrated exceptional airmanship, systems, knowledge, and decision-making under extreme pressure. His experience operating in challenging conditions without full support proved invaluable when our aircraft suffered compound systems failures. I had dismissed him as a regional pilot based on prejudice that European pilots are inherently more experienced. This emergency taught me that experience isn't measured by which routes you fly, it's measured by how you perform when everything goes wrong simultaneously." 3 months later, they spoke at an international aviation safety conference in Amsterdam. Weber told the story honestly, how he'd underestimated his Filipino first officer, how Miguel's judgment had been critical to saving the flight, how his own prejudice had nearly caused fatal decisions. "I had 20,000 hours and 31 years with Lufthansa," Weber told hundreds of pilots. Miguel had 8,000 hours in Southeast Asia. "I assumed my experience was superior. But when we faced cascading failures over the Arabian desert, Miguel's experience proved more relevant than mine." Miguel explained how pilots operating in resource-limited environments develop different skills than pilots with comprehensive support systems. It's not that one type is better. Different environments develop different capabilities. The key is recognizing what each pilot brings and utilizing those skill sets. Today, Weber specifically requests Southeast Asian pilots, when flying through that region, recognizing their expertise with challenging weather and terrain. He advocates within European aviation for re-evaluating how the industry measures pilot competence. Miguel continues, as a training captain for Philippine Airlines, he tells students about that night over the Arabian desert. "The European captain initially dismissed me as just a regional pilot, but when everything went wrong, the experience he'd dismissed became the experience that saved the aircraft. Don't let anyone make you feel inferior because you fly different routes. Your experience is valid. When real emergencies happen, what matters isn't which airline logo is on your uniform, it's whether you can stay calm, prioritize correctly, and make the right decisions when lives depend on it." Weber keeps a photo from the Al Ain landing, the crippled A350 surrounded by emergency vehicles, safe on the ground with all 298 people unharmed. Under it, a note, "The regional pilot I underestimated knew exactly what to do when I didn't. He made the call that saved us when my judgment was compromised." Miguel Santos taught me that years flying perfect aircraft into perfect airports doesn't prepare you for compound failures over remote terrain as well as ours, flying challenging conditions with limited support. The best pilots aren't the ones with the most hours or prestigious airlines, they're the ones who can handle the worst situations with calm competence. The European captain who called Miguel a regional pilot learned that some of the finest aviation skill comes not from flying sophisticated aircraft into major hubs with full support, but from flying challenging routes where weather, terrain, and limited facilities demand resourcefulness no simulator can teach. And a Filipino pilot's calm expertise during cascading emergencies proved that when systems fail and lives are at stake, what matters isn't where you've flown or who employs you, but whether you can make the right calls under